Hey, welcome to the Anxiety at Work podcast. I'm Chester Elton, and this is my dear friend and co-author, Adrian Gostick.
And we've got a great show for you today. Folks, we hope that the time you spend with us is going to help remove the stigma of anxiety and mental health in the workplace and your personal life. We invite experts from the world of work and life to give us ideas and tools to deal with anxiety in our world.
I love it when you use your radio voice. It's just so cool.
Listen.
We want to thank our sponsor, Life Guides. It makes all this possible. It's a peer-to-peer community that helps people navigate through their day-to-day stressors by providing a place of empathy, listening, wisdom, and support with a guide who has walked in your shoes, experiencing the same challenge or life experience as you. So all you got to do is go to lifeguides.com/schedule a demo and add the code HEALTHY2021 in the free text box, and you get 2 months of free service. Pretty good deal.
You can't beat free. Our other sponsor, Go Happy Hub, is also offering 60 days free trial, so that you can't beat that either. Now, Go Happy Hub is the most inclusive and timely way to communicate and engage directly with your frontline employees and your job candidates with a 95% plus open rates. With Go Happy Hub, you can send text messages directly from corporate, enable permissions for your frontline leaders to communicate with their teams. They can send notes of gratitude, logistical updates, referral opportunities, LTOs, new hire introductions, learning content, celebrations, and more. Easily, you get the right message to the right people with simple segmentation. That's Go Happy Hub.
Yeah, and if you say, hey, Adrian sent you, you get 60 days free trial. You know, we are just free. You listen to our show, you get stuff for free. It's awesome. Hey, listen, we have a really interesting guest for you here today. She's our new friend, Morgan Beard. She's a creative life coach and a musical artist. Morgan received her BA in Visual and Media Studies from Duke University, go Tar Heels, and her Master in Art Therapy from the School of Visual Arts in New York City. I don't think they have a basketball team. As an art therapist, she worked in a public elementary school, an adult inpatient psychiatric unit, and a nursing home. Her life came to a screeching halt after burning out in New York City, which she'll tell us a little bit about in a moment. She'll also tell us how she dedicated her life to using creativity to heal and empower. So, Morgan, we're just delighted to have you on the podcast. Thanks for giving us your time.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for that intro.
Well, and thanks, for being on the show, Morgan, and for what we've read about you. You have, and now we're getting to know you. You're so vulnerable, and you're willing to share your story. So, if that's okay, we'd love to start there. You've been very open about that you overcame suicidal depression not once, but several times in your life. Can you take us through that process? Because I think so many people don't talk about this, but we need to learn from each other.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm always willing to share my story in the hopes that someone else relates to it and maybe feels like they're less alone. Because, as you know, one of the most debilitating and vicious parts of depression is the factor that it convinces you to be isolated and makes you think, I'm alone with this. I don't want to burden anyone with what I'm going through, and I should just kill myself, And once you kind of establish that as really a coping mechanism, that's how I've come to see it. Suicidal ideation, self-harm behaviors, all these things that are, yes, they're unhealthy, but they're also a way that someone can say, okay, I have this escape valve. It becomes sort of a slippery slope where then, you get depressed, life seems really hard, and you go to that place of, let me think about death. And I don't want to cast a judgment on that because that's something I still do in my life. It's not like when I say I overcame suicidal depression, that means I'm still alive. It doesn't mean I never think about death again. It comes in waves. It's like the weather. And I think it's so misleading to say there's some magic bullet to solve depression. You learn to manage it. You learn to cope. You learn to understand what do these emotional signals mean and what don't they mean. And you develop healthier and healthier coping mechanisms. Like, instead of thinking alone about wanting to kill yourself, you might call a friend and say, I'm having those thoughts again. Can you talk to me? But, we convince ourselves in our heads that, oh, no one wants to hear that. I don't want to bring their day down. I've already gone to them so many times, X, Y, Z, the other. All those excuses that your depression can come up with, they're very crafty. So you have to evolve to be craftier with it.
It's so interesting. You say it is crafty. It's kind of sneaky. And we convince ourselves that the best thing we can do is just keep to ourselves and isolate. I thought it was interesting the way you pointed out you've got a safety valve. And that safety valve can be a friend or someone that you trust. How do you, as a trusted friend, make it okay for someone like you to call? Because, like you say, the sneaky part about negative self-talk is, well, I've called Adrian 10 times already. I don't want to burden him again. So how do you, as a friend, make sure that 11th call comes through? Do you have any tips on that?
Yes, I do. I volunteered for a couple of years out here on the suicide crisis line. So I'm full of tips for how to be that right recipient of that call. So I think the first thing to say is, ultimately, you are not in control of what your friend does. We get a lot of third-party calls that are, I'm so worried about my daughter. I'm so worried about my friend, this, that, the other. And, what happens if they do it, and it's like, if they do it successfully, there's nothing that you could have done. So knowing your limits of the support you can provide, that's a big part of being that friend who's going to show up again and again. Second thing is listening, treating them like they are the expert on their situation. We rarely want advice, even though our temptation is, oh God, this person has a problem, I want to fix it. And our anxiety kind of kicks in and is like, okay, how do I take this away? How to make this problem go away? But coming from that frame of mind and speaking with that energy translates to that depressed person like they are the problem, rather than you have a problem to solve. And it's just much better to listen, ask questions, be curious, and be compassionate. And you can even just kind of repeat back the things that they're saying to you, like, oh, I hear that you're really struggling, labeling their emotions. And then if you're wrong, be humbly corrected. Oh, I'm so sorry. I really want to understand what you're telling me. Please restate it. What was that like for you? But the closer you are to that person, the harder it is to maintain that sort of objective distance, especially, if you're a parent, or, a close family member. It can be really hard to not let your own emotional attachment to that person get in the way of offering the kind of, empathy that is most appropriate in that situation.
We hear a lot about empathy these days, and that interaction. And this is really a tough subject for a lot of people. Adrian and I recently had a friend that took his life, and it was interesting that the people closest to him had a really hard time forgiving themselves. That there could have been something or should have been something that they did. You mentioned, they said, if they're successful in doing that, you have to, let people know that they were in control. That was their choice. How do you then counsel the survivors? Because I know that was really hard we have a dear friend that was very close to our friend. And he just really, he took it so hard. Like there should have been something that he could have done. Do you come up against that?
Yeah. And it's so tragic. It's so tragic. And I think that people want to feel that we have control over our circumstances. And in most cases, we don't. And that's really hard for people to grapple with. And so you have that dual pain of the loss and then that misfiring of responsibility. Honestly, I would kind of say the same thing, which is listen to that person, don't shame their feelings of guilt or responsibility. You can gently remind them that there isn't anything that they could have done, but I think you're kind of arguing with a ghost in a way where that's not really what they're saying, because really what they're saying is, this hurts so much, this sucks, and I wish it were different. I want the reality to be different.
Yeah, I guess it really does just come back to listening and empathy, doesn't it? Just be there
Always.
for somebody.
Always.
Well, let's turn this a little now on the more positive side to your work as a creative life coach. So when you tell people I'm a creative life coach, what is a creative life coach, and how do you help people as that?
Every job I've ever had, Adrian, I've had to explain. I've never had a simple job like, I'm a lawyer. Okay, cool.
Everybody knows what that is. Yeah.
Everybody knows what that is. So the reason that I call myself a creative life coach is because creativity and making art has always been, for me, the biggest way for me to sublimate my own feelings that I'm struggling with, or process something, or get to the bottom of something in my life. And I got my master's in art therapy for that reason. I was in therapy myself, and I put two and two together of like, I can put the art process plus the therapeutic process. And I learned so much amazing stuff as an art therapist, but then ultimately getting out into the real world and working as an art therapist in some of the settings where they're so needed, I mean, it just didn't work for me. It didn't satisfy me. I was working in a nursing home, so a lot of my clients or patients were very low functioning. And as a life coach, it's more about me being a peer with that person, helping them identify, okay, what are my goals, rather than them coming to me and saying, I'm suffering with this certain mental health presentation. Of course, depression and anxiety are things that people have under their belts often. But it's typically a higher functioning population as a coach. And I do also work with a lot of people who are artists and creatives. I live in Los Angeles, so you can't throw a stone and not hit someone who's doing something artistic, which is amazing. And what I've noticed in my own process is that the extent to which we feel free to create, the extent to which we feel masters of our own creative domain, and that we're able to translate our internal experience into something that moves someone else, that's a really powerful sign of health and well-being. And it is, I mean, it's like breathing air for a lot of the people that I work with, but like the depression, crafty as it is, like the anxiety and the fear and the self-doubt, crafty as they are, they keep us from doing these things that we need to breathe. And so a lot of it is removing those obstacles of internal warfare against our better instincts, and helping people to go within themselves and connect with their internal compass, their higher wisdom that everyone has inside, but often those voices cloud us from really being in communion with. I do a lot of meditation and guided visualization with clients on the fly to just get into their bodies and work through some of these layers, and help them meet their high achieving goals.
A perfect segue into the next question I have for you, and that is about self-talk. We talk so much about anxiety, and there's all this negative talk. So why don't you walk us through a little session on how you correct that negative talk and get to that positive talk that can hopefully pull us out of those spirals that we're in?
Yes. Okay. So what I normally do, a basic kind of process is I get people to first tune into my voice, that
Do you have like a pocket watch that you swing in front of them? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, no, I have them close their eyes because, we are so bombarded by the external world with all these stimuli, and modern life is like, sometimes I'm like, I don't know how people do it. I don't know how Gen Z does it, for the record. Have them close their eyes and just tune their senses into their internal world and start start with breathing. Or if they're particularly anxious, start with put your feet flat on the floor. Feel how grounded and stable and effortlessly that surface supports you, and you don't have to do anything or exert any effort. So you go through this process that kind of gets their mind to relax, gets them to trust you and be along for that ride with you. And then they can often kind of give up, or at least put in the back seat, that voice that may used to have been the driver. And that driver is now just a passenger in the car. So it allows other voices to come in and be more present, or at least part of the conversation that might have been drowned out before by that driver that's like, you suck, you're never going to do anything good, you never, whatever your garbage monster says. And so then I usually start with the body. I say, okay, as you're trying to get in touch with your breath and the flow of being present in this moment with your body, do you notice any part of your body that is gripping or tense or nervous, producing a physical sensation that's really drawing your attention? So I in an effort to get out of someone's mind, I'm using the body as my roadmap for what is this person's subconscious trying to tell us, or what is at the table here that we really need to deal with, hear the message of. And once someone is relaxed and present, and trusts me, that's a really important part of it, they can engage in a more neutral dialogue with that part of themselves. Oh, I have a tension in my chest. Oh, okay. Let's locate that tension in your chest. What does it look like? What is it? What are the sensations? Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it big? Is it small? Just kind of getting to put them in that scientist role that tends to have a more neutral tone than the victim of anxiety or the victim of whatever difficult emotion they're struggling with. And that sensation often has a message. And the more that someone does this self-dialoguing process, the more that they can trust the messages they hear from their body and not get lost in the trap of the overwhelming noise of the messages of their mind. So you open up that self-dialogue relationship, and it's literally like you get the answers to any question you might want to know. It's like an instant fortune teller if you can get in touch with your own
That's awesome.
Your own deeper wisdom.
So I want to follow up on that. First off, tell us how people can learn more about your work, Morgan.
Yeah, so my website is morganbeard.coach, MorganBeard.coach. And that has, a bio about me, more information about kind of what I went through, as well as an outline as best as I can explain just through zeros and ones, how I can work with someone. I do have a couple of videos, but yeah, I think that that's the best way for someone to get in touch with me. And I love hearing from people, people that are curious about my work, or people that are like, hey, I'm ready to jump in. Something you said resonated with me. I love talking to people. So
that's great. Okay, so I want to dive in a little deeper to how we get to know the root of our emotions. You just talked about finding in your body the place where maybe some tension exists. But then how do we get to the root, whether it's sadness, fear, guilt, anger, and then so we can become the ones that, as you say, are steering the ship? How do we go about that?
Yeah, so one freaking difficult layer at a time. So let's go back to that tightness in the chest, for example. So you might not even know what that emotion is at first when you feel that tightness in your chest. As you spend more time with it, you might get a sense if does it have an angry quality? Does it have a anxious quality? The more that you play this scientist role in earnest, the more you can get precise about how you're labeling it. And then once you have a label, that kind of empowers you in the situation against this like amorphous, potentially chaotic sensation that you're experiencing. And as you identify, oh, this is anger. Okay, so what is the anger saying? And you figure out, okay, what might I be angry about? Or you just feel that anger in your chest. Okay, I'm feeling anger. It feels hot. It feels tight. It feels tense. My brow is furrowing. You just let yourself kind of observe your way through what is it like to feel anger in my body right now without personalizing it. That allows it to move and shift and kind of run its course with enough time, patience, and the right kind of compassionate attention. Then, underneath the anger, you might realize, oh, I'm really afraid about this thing I have coming up. That tension in my chest is kind of now melting into a smaller, more childlike feeling. It reminds me, for some reason, of being 5 at the grocery store when blah, 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 blah happened. So then you get present with that next layer inward. It's kind of like an everlasting gobstopper of emotions, and you just keep sucking through each color and each layer of it. And I don't know that you ever totally finish, because we're these ongoing beings that have emotions about things, but we can certainly weed through the more difficult staying layers to get to a place that's softer, more self-aware. And then when those emotions come up, they're not encased in 5 layers of other old emotions. You just go, boom, oh, that's the fear. Instead of flying into an angry rage that's encasing the fear. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's really interesting, Morgan. In our book, Anxiety at Work, we did a lot of research. And we found there really was a generational difference. That older people, like me and Adrian, our generation, we never talked about mental health and anxiety. Are you finding that your generation, you made a reference to Gen Z, are much more open to coaching in this area and wanting to talk about it and find an answer? Are you seeing that?
It's interesting. I have clients of all ages. And I find that the openness, the willingness, is really on a person-to-person basis. I do think that Gen Z tends to have more exposure to the language, mental health issues, and have more peers that are affected by things and are more used to talking about it, are more entrenched in that. That's more of their reality. Whereas older folks might be feeling more like, okay, I'm kind of on my own island with this. But I think age is just a number. I really do. I've seen examples of that my entire life. My parents were significantly older than me, so they come from, an older generation. My dad's in his 80s. My mom just turned 70, and I'm an only child. And so I was very much raised in that culture of, no, we don't talk about this. We don't look at this. They're still like that. I had to really fight with them to become a therapist. They just don't believe in it. They don't want it to be their reality. And I think those older folks that have less exposure tend to have less exposure to this kind of openness. They have more of those encased layers. And at a certain point for some people, those ossify into their identity. And that was what I was experiencing at the nursing home. So I guess the answer is yes, but of course, it's not totally generalizable. But those older folks at the nursing home, more and more of them were just convinced, I am who I am already. I'm not going to engage with this. I don't care. And that's an attitude that is free and available for anyone to have if they choose it. You can't force someone to be pliable, but I find that people of any age can be if they choose, and neuroplasticity is something that we can all opt into, the ability to change our neurochemistry, but they might have more of an uphill battle to do so.
Well, let's talk a little bit about neuroplasticity as we're getting near the end. One of the biggest issues right now in our world is fear. Fear of the unknown. I'm living in the future because of, everything that's gone on for the last 20 months. We've been in PTSD in a way for just about everybody. So how do we get past fear right now? How do we move our brains into a place where we're feeling perhaps more hopeful future?
Yeah. I think that's a great question. So there are a few answers, a few places I could go with this. I'll try to just kind of say, like, some of the things that I've said previously totally apply to this. You sit with it, you expose yourself to your own fear and get yourself to a place where it feels tolerable and you can recognize this is just an emotion I'm feeling. It makes sense given what's going on. And I can tolerate it. Therefore, I can continue to live my life with this fear and allow it to get smaller and smaller as I realize, it's, yes, in some ways I feel like it's keeping me safe, so I hold on to it, but in other ways I can identify it's excessive and it's holding me back, and so you try to turn the dials a little bit. One of the most, I would say, effective and immediate ways you can get out of fear is to be in a play space or a creative flow or a feeling of love and compassion for someone else. So basically trying to occupy a part of your brain where the structure of it is completely different from what you're experiencing when you're in that like lizard brain fear place. You can't be in a playful, open, loving kind of headspace or emotional space that doesn't really coexist with the fear brain because they exist in different parts of the brain. So sometimes rapidly changing your activity or your focus can, switch your emotional body into a different wavelength. And then when you go back and revisit that fear, you can have more of a nurturing, compassionate, loving sort of attitude towards it. And you can really meet what is, in all likelihood, a fear that's exaggerated by trauma, exaggerated by something that's in your early history where my therapist said this to me a while back, and it's really stuck with me. Everything you fear has already happened in some way. So you're building that fear off of bricks and bricks and bricks of past experience. And if you can acknowledge, like, yes, it makes sense that I have these fears because of those experiences. Great, they're trying to keep me safe, but that's not what I'm experiencing right now. The tiger isn't coming for me right now. So let me do something else that makes me feel like I'm tapped into a wavelength of love or play. That can shift that dynamic, but it's tough.
Yeah, great advice. So we are in the speed round as we're starting to wrap up here. Give us one of your, yeah, there you go. Give us one of your personal practices that you do. Some people, like you said, they just change their environment. They get up and go for a walk, or they whatever. What's one thing that you do that you'd like to share with us?
Yes. Okay. I'm excited. So sounding. So as you said earlier, I'm a musical artist. Singing has always been something I've just effortlessly loved. And singing is a great way to scream in a way that's audibly pleasant for other people. If you spend enough time working on it. If you spend enough years suicidally depressed, you can get really good notes out. So a really fun for me and sort of powerful way to transmute emotions that you have is to give them an audible sound. Let them come out of your body carried out in a vibration. I think a lot of people are kind of waking up to or feeling into this idea of like everything's a vibration. And sound, wow, that's very straight up a frequency of vibration. So sing to your favorite song. You don't have to be like, whoa, this is my pain, or you can. You can tune into that nervous stomach and, just embody it and allow yourself to be silly, allow yourself to be ridiculous, and see where it takes you to really feel the quality of the vibrations that come out of your body. And maybe you put words to them. Maybe you play a note on a guitar or a keyboard or whatever. You hum to it. You build on it. There are infinite ways. That's also part of what I love about these creative disciplines and why I continue as a creative life coach, because there's just infinite inspiration that can come from creative tools that have existed since the dawn of time that are free to everyone. Everyone can, make sound. And even if you don't have a voice box, you can pound.
I love it, and we're big fans of being silly. So this is awesome. This is up our alley. Hey, remember again, everybody, check out morganbeard.coach. Learn a little bit more about the important work Morgan is doing. This has been such a great discussion, such a breath of fresh air for us today, Morgan. What one or two things would you want our listeners to take away from today?
You know what? I'm gonna just piggyback right on that silliness thing, because I think we don't talk about that enough. And I am so guilty of that. I get into my episode of depression, or I get into my career focus mode, and I forget what it's all about. I forget that it's about experiencing joy, connecting with others in a playful way. These are things that we all love and agree upon are great things about life. Laughing with someone else, being silly, having a little moment like that. And I think a lot of times it's easy to get bogged down in the analysis of it. What do we do with this emotion? And as I said, with combating fear, getting into that play space, getting into a silliness, somewhere where you're just kind of bouncing off either yourself or someone else without this heavy framework of how I have to be, or what does society expect of me, or this is this thing that I hate, which again, guilty. It is a breath of fresh air, and we should not ever take that for granted.
So much fun. Morgan, thank you for your time. There's going to be some great takeaways. And Adrian, I think we just need to be a little more silly today. I think that's it.
That's it. Yeah, I'm in. Morgan, thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thank you guys so much.
Well, Chess, another great interview, and what a unique perspective Morgan brings us. I'm so thankful that she started by talking about, look, I'm a survivor of suicidal depression, and what we need to understand is, especially as those who may not be suffering from anxiety and depression, is that if you've suffered from anxiety and depression, you've thought about suicide. I mean, that's what people need to understand. This is, if there's almost 100%, it's almost 100%. So don't be surprised when people have these types of feelings. We can work through them.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to ask her, since she was on a suicide hotline, is, is suicide something that, like you've just mentioned, that pretty much everybody considers at some point? And of course, when you do, this idea of being isolated, and you want to be all by yourself, and you don't want to burden other people. And even though she said I'm a survivor, it doesn't mean I still don't think about it. That's an ongoing, it's almost like, you're an alcoholic, you're in recovery. And I think especially with the pandemic and all the pressures that we're seeing and all the negativity that comes through our social media and news, I think it's very easy to slip back into that mindset. So I really appreciated her saying, I'm in recovery. I still think about it, right?
And so then I loved, what she's doing now as a creative life coach. I love this idea of, she walked us through this process of how you identify your tension in your body, but then thinking of ourselves more as scientists, taking ourselves out of the process, because, we've all been through this. We've all got people either in our workplaces, ourselves, our families, that the lizard brain takes over. And then you get quite offended that this person wasn't able to express love, or no. And she says, I love what she said. The loving brain can't exist with the lizard brain. They just can't at the same time. We have to be patient. We have to help people identify that fear they're going through, and let it be safe to come out of that.
Yeah, I liked her idea of the safety valve. Create safety valves, people that you can go to, things you can do to break that pattern and really save yourself, right? That you've got to convince yourself that it's not a burden if you call a friend, and you've got those safety valves. I love that analogy.
And I guess there was a reason that window washers whistle. It's to make some sound, to to let out any fears or frustrations or stresses. Make a little noise. Makes a little art, as she's an art therapist. Our therapist, let's allow our creative, silly sides to come out and realize that maybe sometimes we're taking ourselves way too seriously.
Right. She called it sounding. I liked that. Even your inner negative sounds, to give it sound and be a little silly. And she called it oxygen. And that was really interesting to me. The creativity, those safety valves, those opportunities to just, what did she say? You can kind of scream while you sing. And if you're a good singer, people don't take offense, which I thought was really, really great. Sounding, giving yourself oxygen, giving yourself permission to be silly.
So you now have permission to re-engage with your hip-hop career, Jess. So I'm looking forward to that.
I'm going to re-engage that whole rapping thing. I thought I was pretty good at one point. Eminem was a good rapper. I could be a rapper. Anyway.
So big special thanks to everybody who listened in today, to our producer Brent Klein, to Christy Lawrence, who helps us find great guests like Morgan Beard.
Yeah, and if you like the podcast, share it with friends and family. Download it. That's always an indication that we've got lots of people listening, and we appreciate your time. We also have an online community, WeThriveTogether.global, where we're creating a safe place to talk about anxiety at work and mental health at work. We almost have 1,000 people in the community now. We'd be delighted to have you join us.
Join us, too, on LinkedIn, where we've together have more than 600,000 followers. Chester, I think, has 595 of those 1,000. But hey, and we want to thank our sponsor, Life Guides, a peer-to-peer community that helps people navigate through their day-to-day stressors by providing a place of empathy with a guide who's walked in your shoes. If you go to lifeguides.com/schedule-a-demo and add the code HEALTHY2021, you get 2 months of free service.
Yeah, and you get 2 months of free service as well with Go Happy Hub. I love this company. We love Sean Boyer, who's the founder. The positivity brings in the workplace. You get great messages to frontline employees. You can give logistical updates. You can give thank yous. You can create opportunities and new hire introductions. By the way, it has a 95% open rate. So if you're looking for a really effective way to communicate with your employees, Go Happy Hub is the way to go. You get a 60-day free trial if you just say, hey, Adrian sent me or Chester sent me. So again, we're just givers, Adrian. We just give.
Like Oprah, like Mother Teresa, there we are in the triumvirate now. So, hey, everybody, thank you so much for joining in today. Great guests, great discussion, and we look forward to speaking with you again next week.
Yeah, be happy, be silly, be well.